All right, we're back. And as promised, Caroline's going to take you through what deck she would have played today. And I might have objections on card choices just because that's the kind of guy I am. So, Caroline, take it away.
Oh, I wasn't fast enough. I was trying to show you my Tron lands, but that's okay. Okay, so there's no secret that I'm a big Tron fan, but I need to have a quick asterisk before we go too far into this list. I did borrow this list from the Mox player that's playing it this weekend. I have to admit, I did not do a huge deep dive on it, so if you're going to come at me, I'll do my best, but I'm not taking any hits for this one because I did not build it, but. Overall, it is a Tron list. I will say right off the bat, it is different because it does not have the smaller Karn.
Right.
This is definitely an older style Tron list. I actually don't know if this is. I didn't know this when I posted the list. We're just being completely honest. However, I am super curious about the idea of kind of going old school, and these Maze Mind tomes kind of allow for a little bit more card draw, which Karn sort of did. The baby Karn sort of did. So I don't know. Are you just immediately off it? You're like, no, you need your four mana Karn.
So there's a couple of things I think are interesting. I mean, definitely, Wish Karn is much weaker without access to the 6-mana hammer of the sideboard that just ends the game.
Right.
So I can see the incentive to play is less than it used to be, but the Maze Mind Tome is kind of stands out to me as, again, there's another new card that squeezed its way into an existing deck, and I can imagine the life gain aspect of the card is nice against an aggressive deck, but as far as it's generating, I don't personally feel like Tron is a deck that wants to gain advantage over time. I feel like it's a deck that wants to mulligan to try and assemble exactly what it wants and just put the game away on turn 3 or 4. And Maze Mind Tome doesn't contribute to that. So I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a surprising inclusion in my mind. And then
I do have some concerns about it being played. Like, when are you playing it? Because Tron, has some pretty set turns. Like turn 1, you're playing your map or your stars or your sphere. Then turn 2, you're probably doing something with them. So I do have some concerns, but I really like this idea of trying out a new card. And luckily, for this tournament, that's kind of the perfect place to try it, right? Like you want to go in. Like, people are bringing these other decks. This is not going to be mostly like perfectly tuned decks. Like these are going to try out some new things. However, this is from the Mox, so I'd have a little bit more concern about whether or not that was tested before going to the Mox. But
yeah, and 2 Nature's Claims also, and that's I have played a main deck copy of Nature's Claim before. I don't think I ever played 2, but yeah, if the players feel that that's hitting the metagame in the right spot right now, I don't have any objection to that. I actually find Maze Mind Tomb more questionable than Nature's Claim. And then as far as the rest of the deck is kind of just what we normally think of as Tron. There's a Thragtusk main deck. I like that also at times. I would personally, I think I've come around eventually. Well, in the past, came around to the fact that I prefer 17 land to 18, but okay, I get it. 18, fine, same thing. At least it's not 19, so applause there. And then, and then the sideboard. So there's some things I thought were questionable in the sideboard too. In particular, what stood out to me was the Ensnaring Bridge. And without having the ability to wish for it, we're just boarding it in, I guess, against matchups we need it and hoping we draw it on turn 3 or 4. And I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with that.
Fair enough.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and transition from here, and we're going to go ahead and talk about what we have in our upcoming match for you in round 3. We're going to be watching Anderson Leclerc versus Gabriel Nicholas, and we're going to see a match that we anticipate is probably going to take a while. So let's go ahead and bring up, I believe we have one of the 4-color decks. I think they're actually both 4-color decks, but Gabriel Nicholas, 4-color Omnath.
So I was trying to find some differences here between the two lists. We can talk about, so this one has, kind of all the things you want. It's got the Renin 6s, the Teferi Time Raveler, Big Teferi, and Hero Dominaria. How do you look at it as Omnath? What a surprise. It's just got everything. So I have a question for you. The Omnath decks, the thing they're looking for is that 5-mana payoff. So in this deck, it seems to be Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and it looks like Hour of Promise. Don't see anything else. Do you have feelings or opinions on what 5-mana payoff you think is best right now, or is it really just an experimental kind of thing?
Well, I'm sure it takes a lot of play to try and really make a determination. And if we can bring up the other deck list, we'll see one of the differences, because a lot of these cards are similar in both decks. But I'm glad you specifically mentioned the 5-mana payoffs, because in this version, we have 3 Time Warps, which are...
This is the one I like. I like the Time Warps.
Yeah, and so because... so here we still have the 5-mana Teferis, but we have Time Warp, which is a card that... And I don't think in Modern, unless your deck has 20 Time Walk effects, you generally see 0. And here we have 3. Which is kind of, I would say, a new development in the format. And it obviously makes sense to want to be able to Time Warp with Planeswalkers, because that's just, magnifies the strength of the card. But Hour of Promise versus Time Warp is one way of looking at the difference between these 2 decks. One is better for setting up, one is better when you are set up. I don't really have a thought on which one is going to be more useful here, but
would it be possible that the Field of the Dead, even if it's not getting Hour of Promise out, is Field of the Dead just going to be a 1-up in this kind of mirror? Like just a bunch of free creatures potentially, because these games are going to go forever.
You are definitely right. The games are going to last a while. There is not efficient removal. There are no sweepers. There's efficient removal for creatures, but when you're spending your lightning bolts or whatever else on tokens, you're going to fall behind in cards. So yes, definitely the Field of Ruin is going to play a role. And if it gets into play, could easily decide it. It's going to be much harder to defend Planeswalkers against a horde of zombies than it is against a one creature, even as strong as like something like Omnath is.
Cool. So we're watching from Anderson Leclerc's side. Pretty casual opening hand. You got your Growth Spiral, your Omnath, and some protection in Force of Negation. So here we go. I think
this looks...
What could you ask for?
Stellar.
Yeah.
So we are here starting up round 3, and it's going to be a little tough to tell as how Gabriel, the other side, is developing, since we are seeing a lot of the same cards, and Anderson's hand looks tremendous. Gabriel's hand could be the same. We don't know. And again, we're watching first one player's perspective at Nerd Rage, like we always do. This is by choice, not because we can't do it. Lots of broadcasts show you both sides, and I understand the appeal of that. However, we together at Nerd Rage feel like the tension and drama that you get from a game where you only see one side is heightened, and also, in a way, changes the viewing experience, as you can really put yourself in the position of one player and think and play along a little bit and decide what you would do in their place. So we are watching from Anderson's side here as the Growth Spiral ramps out, probably an Omnath, and now there is drawing the second Force of Negation. It doesn't really matter what card it was as long as it was blue, and that's a meaningful development. But like you were alluding to, we may have a meaningful development on the other side without even casting anything.
I saw that one. It's a little bit of a tension to play a colorless tap land in your 4-color deck, but it does have some advantages here for sure. Okay, you know what? You totally pointed out the whole Force of Negation wasn't actually on until that second copy was drawn, which is lucky.
And so the Hour of Promise gets countered at card advantage for Gabriel, but probably would have rather, if it resolves, I guess you're getting 2 lands and 2 zombies. So even though we used 2 cards to trade for it, maybe it wasn't so much card disadvantage. And now we have an unchecked Omnath.
We do, but not a lot to do with it, unfortunately. Our perfect hand kind of drew a lot of lands.
Yeah, it did. And so the players traded Force of Negations, as our Ren and 6 just got countered out of existence, and now an opposing Ren and 6. And okay, so it's just Omnath, and Omnath is a lot, but it's just Omnath versus, let's see what Gabriel can muster. But yeah, if Anderson wasn't flooding out here, if Anderson had, let's say, 2 spells in the land instead of 3 lands in hand, then his position would look very good.
Okay. Anderson did draw the Time Warp off the top, which which is great actually. We get to see both 5 drops from both Gabriel and Anderson, so we'll see which one pulls ahead here. I have to imagine taking an extra turn feels pretty good.
Yeah, I would imagine. Oh, this is brutal. So I'm not sure necessarily that this could have been avoided from Gabriel's side, but this is really when you're Cryptic Command to tap and then Time Warp is just such a blowout.
Yeah. Oh no. So that was Gabriel protecting the Wrenn and 6, which unfortunately will not work because we do get to attack again to a tapped out opponent. Unfortunate.
Yeah, and that goes down. And Anderson gains 4 more life, and with fetch lands just coming out of his ears, he's loaded up to trigger whatever he wants with the Omnath at any given point the rest of the game.
Yeah, I'm just shaking my head at the first ability is to gain 4 life. It's so much life.
It is. It really is. And here we have one on the other side, but Path to Exile can take it down, denying any triggers aside from the come into play draw card. And
Gabriel has, is that 6 lands? So there's our 7th land.
So, I mean, Gabriel still isn't, I mean, he feels like he's gotten kind of the bad end of some exchanges here, but he's still very much in this.
Oh, you gain 4 more life.
Mm-hmm. Gain 4 more life, but another token for Gabriel here.
Oh.
And a path. So, okay, I was questioning the timing on that, but it's because the Field of Ruin timing is because Gabriel needed another white mana to be able to cast his path. So that's why that happened the way it did. Oh, okay. Now, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, really great draw, but we are going to see this Field of the Dead make these Planeswalkers less protectable than they normally would be.
Yeah, this Field of the Dead it has already started to take over the game, and Gabriel was kind of behind by a decent amount after that Cryptic turn. So those zombies really putting in some work.
Yeah.
And Teferi didn't find anything. So we're not going to be seeing Teferi for long.
No, yeah, and just to drive the point home further, yeah, if there had been one creature, however strong it was, in play for Gabriel, Teferi would have just tucked it. But with 3 zombies in play, there's just no way of getting around this, and Teferi just bites it after drawing 1 card, which is, kind of unimpressive.
So I assume at any point, if Anderson does draw an Uro, though we did just see Gabriel cast an Uro has to be one way back into this game because Anderson would get to cast kind of both halves of it, get some cards. Like that could be a path to stabilizing.
Certainly, that would be an excellent draw. As
okay. I take it back, I think.
However much life cushion Anderson has created for himself in this game, it's going to go by very quickly. He's probably only got two turns. 10. Yeah, he has 1 more turn after this one as it currently stands. Fetching to Thin here.
Oh no, I like it. We're getting
not fetching to Thin. We're going to Time War. Oh, this is cool.
Yep. Well done. Those lines are so hard to see, and you could see that Anderson saw them very quickly, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, so Mystic Sanctuary fetched out, returns the Time Warp to the deck. Jace draws it in addition to another Time Warp, and okay, let's see what can be strung together here. As Time Warps with Jace in play, like we said, Time Warps with Planeswalkers, very, very strong.
Yes. Now we know that there are no wraths to be seen, so these creatures will have to be dealt a little bit of a slower way. But for now, we've got Jace really doing some heavy lifting, drawing a lot of cards.
Another Sanctuary, which is another turn. And there is one Cryptic Command in Anderson's deck. And if that is found, then I believe we might be done, as the Mystic Sanctuary can be bounced and replayed, and the Time Warps would then be infinite, I believe. But even barring that, this is quite a display here of the power of this deck, which does so many things well, makes so much mana, and Omnath does so much stuff, and free turns with when you're doing stuff is pretty exciting.
Anderson is going off. Is this turn? This is our fourth extra turn or third extra? I think third extra turn. Wow.
Yeah, but it is when it runs out, the whole house is going to collapse, as there's 8 tokens in play, which are going to wipe out the Planeswalkers. So really, this needs to continue.
It does, and we have not found. Okay, so this will get another Mystic Sanctuary. We do have a turn coming off. Like, there is one more turn floating, and now we'll have 2 more turns floating, I guess. Are we going to bounce a zombie? We're going to bounce a zombie.
Sure. Yeah, get that Time Warp in hand, and then if we can get Run in 6 the ultimate, well, that's also another way of just ending the game with turns.
Oh, we drew another fetch land, which should be one more Mystic Sanctuary.
Are there actually 4? No, there's only 3 in the deck.
So there's only 3.
There is not another one.
Darn.
But now the Cycle Enters for this is wild.
Oh.
This is there, and there it is. There's the Cryptic Command. So is there? If there's a turn floating right now, then I believe we are done.
There is a turn floating. Can you talk us through a little bit about what a cryptic loop would look like? Just so I have it in my head.
So what we're going to do is we're going to. Oh, the relevant part is to balance the Mystic Sanctuary, and put the Time Warp or Cryptic Command back.
How do we put both back? Like, how do we get infinite turns?
Okay.
Or do we just use the Cryptic to tap down their team infinitely?
Okay, maybe I misspoke there in experience with the deck, but I think well, if we can just let's see. What all can we do here? We can. Okay, we don't. For one thing, we don't. As we try and figure this out as we're going along, we don't actually need infinite. We only need to go until the Run in 6 ultimates.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, so we got the Time Warp back. We left the Cryptic in the yard.
But you are right, because we can only recur. We only have 1 land drop a turn. So even if we could somehow get 2 Sanctuaries into play, well, we can't do that. No matter what I guess with Growth Spirals, another way to get us an extra turn. But we can only advance so far each turn.
I think this is our last extra turn, unless you can see a way. And this is only getting Run in 6 up to 7, so it's not
right. So we're a turn. We're 1 short at this point. Although with those Uros, now we're gonna be able to survive anyway. So I think Gabriel gave up 1 turn too early.
I also think so as well.
So that was an example of the commentators not understanding the deck as well as the players, which is going to happen fairly often because these players are practiced with their decks, and these are decks that we're just kind of familiar with, but not going through the motions with ourselves. But I do think Gabriel gave up 1 turn early there. He might have lost anyway, but the next turn was going to look different than the previous approximate 6 or 7 did.
I have to admit, I loved Anderson's on that turn where, we were like, okay, like this is it. This is the make it or break it turn. Just slammed, knew exactly what was happening. Mystic Sanctuary, get back Time Warp, 0 chase, let's go. Like, just so much confidence in Anderson. No, hey, I'm doing this, and then this is my next plan. And then, 10 minutes later,
Right.
still doing that thing. And I think that is so cool. The knowledge, like the understanding of your deck, is a huge part of especially a deck like this.
Okay, so we see a Veil of Summer get boarded in. We saw a Path to Exile and a Time Warp go out. Let's go ahead and jump to the other sideboard and see what we're looking at here.
Sure.
If we get, yeah, there we go. So we saw Veil of Summer come in on Anderson's side. I would expect it to come in for Gabriel's side as well. We
as well as
have
Mystical Dispute, probably.
Ashiok is better in Anderson's deck than it is in Gabriel because of the Hour of Promise. Yeah. But there are still millions of fetch lands on both sides, so Gabriel conceivably could bring his in also. Additionally, wiping the graveyard out, as we saw there, really matters with Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what about Soul Guide Lantern coming in from Gabriel to kind of interact with Anderson there?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's not powerful enough?
Given that it's a cantrip and it could impact the game, I would not be at all surprised to see it. I think both players probably have. I mean, really, all they need to be able to remove are maybe like 2 copies total of Omnath and Uro in a whole game. You really don't need more than 2 spells, so there's probably some removal that can be adjusted. There's probably room for a few changes, because really what we're going to need are things that kill planeswalkers, counters. Mystic Sanctuary having to come down tapped hurts a little bit here. But
that was a kind of a really interesting play, because we have these Wrenn and 6s in our hand and a fetch land in our yard, and choosing not to play it on that turn. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm with you. That's interesting. Even if you want to play, even if you're not going to play the Wrenn and 6 this turn, which I think you definitely could have made an argument to do that, like the Mystic Sanctuary, like your life total is unlikely to matter a great deal in this matchup. So I think it's definitely a spot where we could have done things differently.
But do you think that the Mystical Dispute was really just, hey, I want to hold this up for the rest of the game? Is that sort of a nod to that?
I think that's likely, but that by itself doesn't mean that the Mystic Sanctuary had to be played that turn.
Right. Well, the Wrenn and 6 did come down this turn, and we do have this Mystical Dispute again, hitting an Omnath. Pretty good hit, actually.
Well, that's great. Again, unless there's another one, in which case then it kind of sucks. But yeah, that's really what you're hoping for here. And now we have a free turn, which isn't going to be the most impactful. And Mystic Sanctuary comes down again. Okay, I like this.
Yes, I like this a lot. Wow, so the Mystical Dispute was returned to the top. The Uro will therefore draw it and put in a land. My goodness, Anderson is doing a lot in the first couple turns of this game. A little different than last game, to be honest.
Yeah, right. And so we have here now the Wrenn 6 can return the land, and then we have counter up and Time Warp available for next turn.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to highlight, and it's kind of the same message I've been saying, but these triomes have really, really helped these huge mana bases in Modern. And I think that's also like they come into play tapped. You're like, these aren't good, but because they're fetchable, they really have improved a lot of people's mana bases, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, I actually made the observation yesterday to someone that this triomes actually are reasonable in Legacy also, even though they come into play tapped, just because if you have no other turn 1 play, then you can just fetch it into play. It doesn't matter if it comes to play tapped, and then the ability to cycle late game, and it's just smooth on the mana. Yeah, I like the card. I think they again, this is just kind of every set has a rare mana fixing land of some sort or some mechanic or another, and sometimes they percolate back through formats, and this one definitely we're seeing that.
Yeah. Wow, we saw both cards that you speculated on. Ashiok came down that turn, did get rid of that Uro in Anderson's graveyard, and then also the Soul Guide Lantern came down. So, this is a little tougher for Anderson right now. The fetch lands being turned off, I'm sure, are not, the favorite things.
Right, and so Wrenn 6 took a shot at Ashiok, and then we're going to see Time Warp, and then we're going to see Time Warp and then Time Walk again. We could. No, we do not.
We can't fetch.
Oh,
that's what you were
correct.
Saying. Yeah. But we can't. Oh. Okay, we really want to get rid of this Ashiok.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not soon enough, right? This Time Warp will get exiled.
Yes, it will. Although, at least, actually,
Oh,
it does
wait. Hold
wipe
on.
out the Ashiok or the Soul Guide Lantern. But
Okay, ignoring the Soul Guy Lantern, we can fetch in response in that
we
spot, couldn't we?
could. We
Okay.
could. Maybe a little surprised that we didn't.
Okay. I was just
I,
curious.
and a Soul Guide Lantern could have been broken in response.
Right.
But I don't
We
know.
have
It's
two
hard.
fetches, though, right?
Yeah, we have two fetches, which our opponent just turned back on for us. So that's a play I'm going to say I would question. I'm not prepared to say that it's wrong, but Gabriel either if that's correct to do, then Gabriel really knows what he's doing.
Right. Oh, sorry, you're referring to like getting rid of Ashiok off the board.
Right. I'm referring to giving up your Ashiok, which is wiping out two fetch lands that are in play. I guess the Ashiok. I'm sorry, the Ren 6 would kill it next turn anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you think I'll just fire it off and get 4 more cards out. That's actually probably pretty reasonable. But now it's returning a land instead, which it wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. I don't know. There's a trade-off there, but potentially that was
Talk? Can we just talk about his Ren and Six's return to fetch line almost every turn, and yet somehow Anderson is still at 18. Like the life gains in these decks is just crazy. Okay, well, Anderson's got a lot of lands and some kind of later mystical disputes, which probably are less good. Not bad, but less good. And Gabriel has a full grip.
Okay, so we see Our Promise, which will eat both of the mystical disputes. So that's a
and
nice
still might not work.
Chew up card advantage. Okay, Gabriel chooses not to pay, which is highly suggestive that Gabriel has a counter of his own to play back. In this case, Gabriel would have been much better off just paying the 3, as Anderson would have just had to expend the other dispute. But Gabriel being careful here, which I understand. And meanwhile, this Ren 6 is just grinding away. Anderson doesn't really need more lands, but Ren 6 is a threat you have to deal with eventually. I believe it's on 5 loyalty, and the ultimate's at 7.
It does. And you're talking about Gabriel having a counter spell and just kind of looking through, and there was only 3 mana, so just looking through, it's really actually only mystical dispute. At least, I guess Mana Leak.
Well, it was so Ether Gust. Ether Gust is what he had, and it was just played on the Ren 6, and they got Force of Negation instead of Mystical Disputed, which we'll see whether that ends up being a mistake or not. And
well,
I think so okay. Anderson had his reasons for making that choice, and given the way things turned out, he made the wrong one, but he doesn't necessarily know that's going to happen in advance.
Yeah.
And now Teferi of Hero Dominator is on the board, and Ren 6 is good, and Teferi is gooder.
Perfect. We did get this growth spiral off the top, which hopefully can find something cool. It did not. It found a Veil of Summer. I have to admit, I really get confused when cards like Veil of Summer are played in formats because I really genuinely think that they're banned in everything. And so I always do a double take. I'm like, wait, what? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's not banned in Modern. Who knew?
Yeah, I mean, Cryptic Command is legal, so why can't we have Veil of Summer, which is basically the same card for 3 less mana? A lot of the time. Yeah, Veil of Summer is super powerful, like you're saying, not playable in every format, and it just has a way of just really turning games around when blue and black cards are involved. However, right now, it's not going to do a whole lot, but at least it's live, whereas it's a cantrip. At worst, it's a cantrip. Almost whenever Anderson wants. This Mystical Dispute, however, might not get to do much this game.
So we do have this Mystic Sanctuary, should we need it. which we currently don't. I guess there is some shenanigans to be had with, drawing the card off Veil of Summer.
Right, and there is Path to Exile in the board to fetch out with Mystic Sanctuary if Anderson wants to, but that didn't happen. And I mean, as much as we want to draw action and not draw a Path to Exile, I don't feel like we're comfortable letting ourselves get attacked by Uro either. And that looks like what's going to happen.
Okay, here comes in the Uro from Gabriel. I assume attacking Ren 6.
Yeah, how does... Oof. So now Anderson really doesn't have much going on.
Well, that's something.
You know?
Teferi, Hero of Dominaria was drawn for turn for Anderson.
And this is where you're hoping your opponent has a counter. But just one.
Yeah. Okay, let's find out. Gabriel has 6 cards in hand.
Oh, that's very many.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so Gabriel is 8 mana. Anderson needs him to play a 6 mana counter. The Epiphany.
Sublime Epiphany.
Sublime Epiphany. That's it. That's what Gabriel needs to have for Anderson to have a chance here. Unfortunately, it's Cryptic Command. So that game is over with, and we're going to get a game 3. So a couple of things happened in that game that kind of certainly impacted the outcome. Anderson's choice of counter during that end of turn, I don't remember what was being cast, but the choice of Force Negation versus Mystical Dispute, that mattered. The choice, it was on Ether Gust. The choice of, do I pay for the Mystical Dispute or just let my spell get countered, that mattered somewhat. Yeah, cool game.
Oh, there was also an Ashiok turn,
right.
And I kind of wanted to break it down a little bit more. So Gabriel removed Ashiok from the board, trying to target Anderson's graveyard, but Anderson had 2 fetches. Was there not a possibility there for Anderson to try and go and get the Time Warp back into hand? Like, I about that.
I think there was.
Yeah. But we're back in game 3.
Yeah. And okay, so again we see Mystic Sanctuary going into play early, although this time I'm not going to suggest that it is unreasonable. This is fine. There's, once again, it would have, I don't know, for I know there's multiples, there's 3 in the deck, but I still hesitate to play them early if I don't have to. And again, in this case, I don't know that we had to, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. No,
I try to be okay with it.
Well, okay. Except for the Jace, this is looking like a standard Growth Spiral, Uro, Tameo.
Okay, so what's your play here on turn 3? You definitely have options. You have Uro. Oh, wow. Okay, you can do anything you want. Mystical Dispute would be a great draw here, by the way.
Yes, I was going to say mana leak is something still to be concerned about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may have been boarded out, but yeah, it's definitely, you have to be at least conscious of it.
So it looks like Uro is the safest thing, right? Because it tends to resolve. Ooh.
Right. And that's another thing we saw last game was Gabriel played Uro early and Anderson chose not to counter it, which was probably the correct decision. Here we have one being countered.
Okay. It's interesting. Anderson didn't actually have that many lands, so the Uro would have given him not an advantage, right? Like, we would have played our 4th land this turn anyway. Unless we drew one off the top, but like, we weren't getting a
you're right. That's
advantage.
True. You're right. You're right.
But I did get the mana leak out.
Mm-hmm.
To the start.
Which, I mean, definitely matters as taking a glance at what Gabriel has access to. There's 2 Force of Negation, 3 mana leak. There's 1 Ether Gust main deck, 3 Cryptic Command. So there's a lot of counter magic main deck. I think more than there is in Anderson's version.
Mm-hmm.
And out of the board, there is 1 Mystical Dispute, 1 Ether Gust. So, okay, there's a solid amount of counter magic in this deck. So burning off a mana leak on an early Uro, that seems reasonable, especially because, as we saw last game, we can easily, and in fact likely, end up in a point where tax encounters are dead.
So we got Gabriel playing a Wrenn and 6, getting back the fetch land. Always the best thing you can do. It must feel so good, right? It's just a card. You're just drawing.
Yeah, it's just free.
So I'm kind of curious. Oh, it looks like Anderson would have hit the land if Uro had resolved, which obviously doesn't matter, but it is funny to check on.
All right, so since the fetch is being played here, presumably we're playing something that costs 4 mana, or okay, we're double fetching. There's just options here. You could play.
Well, I imagine we're not playing Jace if we just double fetch.
Right. Yeah, you're definitely correct about that. Are we leading with Uro and hoping to draw land? No, we're playing.
Oh, we're casting Uro from our graveyard. Wow.
Lots of options, even the ones we're not even paying attention to.
Yeah. So well, those double fetches seemed important for that plan.
Yeah. Uro from the yard gets in. And the most likely way this is dealt with is probably Path to Exile, which would give another land drop. And these control mirrors, having extra land drops is always great.
To a point. We did see Anderson have a lot more lands than Gabriel in game 2, but unfortunately no white source fetch there for Gabriel, so passing back. But that Wrenn and 6, we're going to see that fetch land whenever we want it.
Wow. So what land are we fetching here as we played Scalding Tark from hand instead of Flooded Strand from the graveyard?
I mean, my guess is a white source, but this feels like a painful way to do it. Oh, no.
Interesting. Okay, so we can still make another land drop and take advantage of the Wrenn and 6 land for this turn.
Oh, we can't, right? Because we've already played a land from our hand, and then we just played the Uro land.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we didn't have the Wrenn and 6 land in our hand. Okay, so this is a mystical dispute, I have to assume. It's not a path.
Yeah, this is
And we're up to 7 lands, right? So dispute is nothing to us, to Anderson.
This looks like it's falling apart. There's a Veil of Summer as a cantrip, hoping to make a force of negation work, but one is not available.
I have to admit that this is a pretty big advantage for Anderson at this point. Probably ending the turn with 3 permanents in play, a bunch of cards in our hand, and Gabriel on the back foot for now. But we've seen crazier things, right? Like Anderson has, I think I would safe to say, has led most of the games in early. And that Field of the Dead, it's there.
You are right about that, but boy, I mean, this is a lot.
Yes. And Field of the Dead is quite far off, right? We're at 4 lands in play at the moment, and no clear way of getting extra lands into play. So. Okay.
We're at 5. It counts itself, so we have 5.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Wow, Caroline can't count to 5. There we go.
That's
it even tells me on the screen.
You're good at other things, as far as the commentary goes. We'll just leave the math out of it for you.
Thank you. This is, oh my goodness. So one thing that Anderson is actually light on is land drops, but at this point having 7 lands in play is probably okay in terms of, for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, Anderson just has so many resources to work with.
So what are you forcing here? Like, what is I have to force this?
I don't know. I might be just about anything. Okay, well, we can't force that. But almost anything that we could force, I think I would.
And we can still deal with this quite, Teferi minus is just always an option if we actually want to keep attacking.
Mm-hmm.
Oh?
Well, and this Uro's not even in play, right? It is in play.
Oh, no, it is. That was a cashback one. Yeah. But that Field of the Dead did happen. Okay, here's our force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so there's a zombie in play. Terrific. That pads our
This could be it. I don't know. The zombies overtook game 1. Until Anderson went off with Time Warp, actually. So I don't know. But
Yeah,
our strategy of having a lot of Planeswalkers in play is going well.
Lots of things are going well. I'm trying to think of things that aren't going well right now. I don't even know what that would be.
Well, no Time Warp, I assume.
No Time Warp. One got boarded out, so obviously.
We're going to find one now.
Yeah, whoa, bam, there we go. And another force to help protect things. This is looking really good. So, okay.
Okay.
Uro's going to be able to swing in here. Zombie's going to block or not. Probably not. But with another force, the Time Warp's coming this turn because of the Omnath mana.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I knew that in my head. So what I was spending time calculating was how many turns. I wanted to see how many turns Anderson got before, like, just with Mystic Sanctuaries. And I think it was actually just enough to be lethal. Sorry. Because there is potentially there's Omnath Burn as well with the Uro land drop. So I think Anderson had that one wrapped up for sure.
Yeah. If the Time Warp hadn't shown up, given that the Force of Negation was in hand, which we know is going to resolve because the Teferi's in play, there's the ways out are for Gabriel there were extremely limited, if they even existed, without the Time Warp. And with the Time Warp, obviously, it's just done. Okay, so
I have a question.
Yeah.
Before we disappear for a second, I have a question. So we had two decks that are doing very similar things and have decided to have two different payoffs. Mm-hmm. We got to see both of them do their thing in all of the games we watched. Do you have any conclusions from that? Like, the Time Warps looked really powerful in the two games that we saw them go off.
We did. Definitely. That would be impossible to deny. Something I think that we can point out is that the Hour of Promise got countered in the one game and would have been really great if it had resolved. However, when we got to the completely abusive endgame spot, like, okay, if we're casting turn 5 Time Warp or Hour of Promise, there's probably scenarios where either one is better. But if we're casting the same spell 3 turns in a row on turn 10, Time Warp is obviously far superior than Hour of Promise of searching all our lands out of the deck. So in this matchup, I think that the Time Warp seems to be the victor. That's only one sample size match, so that we don't want to base off that, but just on the hypothetical idea of repeatedly casting one spell or the other late in the game. Yeah, Time Warp seems like the way to go.
Cool.
It'd be interesting to try and put, because these decks are developing. These cards some of these cards are fairly recent and evolving because there's been bannings and such. Are there other cards that you can think of that would be late game, worth recurring multiple times, that are also reasonable costed enough that they're somewhat helpful in the mid game? I don't know. Maybe you can think about that. Let us know in chat if you come up with something. We'll give you the commercial break to think about it, and we'll be right back.